Hello, once again, I'm Jerry Tachoir, and welcome back to episode number 2 of Ask Jerry Tachoir. Today's question comes from Tom Sweeney, and it's a rather long question, and I'm going to break it up into kind of two sections that I found. Let me begin. Hi, Jerry. How many hours or years did you practice, and what materials did you primarily practice before you felt confident enough to play, say, a set of jazz standards in front of an audience and or with other musicians in a way that you could genuinely contribute to the group's sound? For example, create interesting lines over chord changes, comp with good voicings, etc. When did you feel confident enough on the instrument and in your musical abilities that you identify as having the ability to make artistic choices versus the beginner? I actually get this question a lot. And it primarily has to do with people wanting to know how much effort and time that you have to invest in something to get the results. Now let me contribute with the second part of this question, and then I'll tie it all in. The second part is, essentially, when did you really identify as a vibes player? 1 to 3 years, 4 to 6 years, et cetera, et cetera. I've heard many successful vibes players say that they began on drums. So I'm always fascinated with the idea of the path these individuals took to learning melody and harmony and developing their own voice. So let me start by saying, when I was in high school, I had a band, and this band was primarily a wedding band, a general business band, and we played pop tunes and light jazz standards. And we would improvise, but our improvisations were more of enhancing the melody, embellishing the melody, noodling around with the melody, because we really didn't know improvisationally what we were doing. So we would take a tune, example. We would just kind of take that melody and just noodle with it, and that's how we started improvising. It wasn't actually until I got to Berkeley that I realized that there are skill sets that you have to learn, and there's also a vocabulary that you have to learn. You have to learn your modes, you have to learn your scales. While at Berkeley, what I did was I analyzed a lot of music. I analyzed the melody notes by looking at the melody of the tune, figuring out this note, is this the 5th, is this the 3rd, is it the 7th of the chord, is it a tension, is it a 9, is it 11? So you go through each one of the notes and you're relating it to the chord that's given, and you're trying to figure out how that fits in with the chord and what its actual value in relationship to the chord is. Once you know that, then you go back and then you analyze the actual chord progression. And you get this in theory classes and composition classes, but you're taking each one of the chords and you're putting the Roman numerals above it. So it's like 2 minor 7, 5, 7 to 1. Once you go through the whole tune and you identify the relationship of each chord from itself and also to the next chord and from the chord you're coming from, then you have a relationship of how these chords progress and how they resolve into the next chord. So when you have a D minor 7, G7 to C, that would be a 2-5. The 5-7 then is resolving into 1, and that's a nice resolution for those two chords. Within those two chords then, you have chord scales, or you can call them modes, or some variation of a mode or a hybrid type scale that you would use then to give you the correct notes to play over those chords. Now, you don't want to be playing just scales. Nobody wants to go and hear you play D Dorian scale, G Mixolydian scale, C Ionian scale. But what you're doing then is you're taking that Dorian and you're using some of the notes, you're using your ears to try to massage it in such a way that you're playing interesting melodies, making the resolutions when they occur, getting to the dominant chord, establishing it, then making the resolution from the dominant chord into the Ionian mode that we were talking about. So it goes something like this. Here would be the D Dorian, G Mixolydian, C Ionian, Dorian, G, Dorian, so that's how you kind of like figure it out. Now, I started out as a drummer, like this question talked about, as most vibes players do, I would imagine, most mallet players. So I spent several years developing my reading skills in rhythms. I could take the notes and I could just play them on a snare drum or whatever, the rhythms exactly and fast. I got really, really good at it. And if you like math and rhythms, I mean, they all go together. If you know the value of a quarter note, the value of an eighth note, a quarter note triplet, how it all fits in and how it all ties in, then it's real easy. It's not that complicated to learn to read. Once I got then into the mallets, where not only am I playing rhythms, but I'm also playing melodies and chords, then it became more of a challenge because the melody notes that you're given then have to actually fall into the right kind of concept of the time. You have to be playing not only the melody notes accurately, but the rhythm that's given with it too. And then when it comes time to adding the chord, then you're responsible for filling it in with that. So it's an involved process. I can't actually give you, like, it's going to take you 1 year to do this and 2 years to do this, because it depends on the individual. It depends on your knowledge, what you know to get started, who you're studying with, where you're studying, how much time do you contribute to practicing and getting your act together. But it's a process. And it's a learning process that goes on for a lifetime. I don't think we ever stop learning to do our skill. So begin by simply figuring out what you want to accomplish. Do you want to learn to improvise, or do you want to just learn to be able to play tunes and harmonize them? And you have to go through the analysis process. You first of all take a piece of music, you open it up, scan it over, kind of figure out generally what key you're in, where the repeats are. Then kind of look at the melody notes. Is there anything complex? Is there anything I have to worry about? Then you kind of want to look at the notes and say, okay, I know this is the third of this chord, this is the fifth of this chord. Go through that and kind of get an idea of it. And then take the chord progression and you have to analyze the chord progression. At first, this is a time-consuming process. Your mind is going to be constantly clicking. I remember at Berkeley, and this was about probably second semester after I got all this harmonic information, I started playing, and as I'm playing, my mind is going, Dorian, Mixolydian, Ionian, Phrygian, and my playing sounded that way. It sounded very mechanical and not very creative. It was just going through the motions of trying to play the right notes. And that takes a while. That takes several years of evolution where you can start figuring out how I understand this harmony and how to apply scales and notes to that harmony. And then you start to play. And again, I can't give you a specific amount of time because it's going to change from individual to individual. But rest assured, it is a time-consuming process and something you have to put the time into it. At the same time, it's a vocabulary. Improvisation means you have to, it's like a language. If you want to speak French, you can't just speak French. You have to either go to Paris and immerse yourself and pick up the vocabulary and start speaking French. Same way with jazz. If you never heard anybody improvise, you have no vocabulary as to how to form an improvisation, how to take your melodies and create something interesting. So listen to music, go out and listen to live music, come back to your own space, try to figure out what you want to do and work on figuring out how to apply the proper scale to the chord, and then how to take that scale and to break it up into interesting creative melodies. And again, I don't know how long it's going to take you. I mean, for me, it's one of those processes that took me a long time. When I graduated Berkeley, I remember just playing a lot and never kind of really being completely satisfied with my playing. I'm at the point in my career now where I could generally play pretty well all the time. There are days when I will play great. There are days when I'll play average. So it just varies. And again, it's an ongoing learning curve. You got to put the time in. And again, I'm not going to give you specific. This is 2.5 years to do this and a year. You have to put the time in and work. And you'll know. You'll understand when you get to the point where you feel like you're not overthinking, when you can just play. And yes, you kind of went through the learning process and the analysis process, but now you're just relaxing and you're listening and you're forming resolutions. If something is dissonant, that means it needs to resolve, and it usually resolves in a half step either direction to create a resolution to that dissonance. So work at it, put the time in, and I think you'll do just fine. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. And again, let me say, if you want to ask a question, just go to my website, www.tachoir, spelled Tachoir.com, and you'll see a section where you fill in it. There's a little link at the top, contact, and hit that and put your question in with your email, and I'll either get back to you or we'll do one of these video sections. So thanks again. Take care.